Anyway, so I was telling everybody who just joined us that you have traveled to so many African countries.
Everyone.
You've traveled to every African country, and
Yes.
you've traveled to over 100 countries in the world. And I always tell you, every time I see you in a new country, like, I want your life. I want to be you. I just want to get paid to travel to every country. So let's talk about brands, because we have just 30 minutes on this conversation. You have traveled all over the world. You know, you have probably hobnobbed with captains of industries, government officials in that regard, especially for branding and marketing. And I come from a state where in 1999, the governor of my state branded that state, gave it a new look, Cross River State. So we had Destination Cross River. It was a brand of its own. Yes. I'm wondering, as somebody who is so well traveled, what do you think is the major challenge of African brands and African countries, and why do you think that these challenges have lingered for so long?
Well, I think the most the first challenge for me for African brands is the confidence challenge. That Africans don't have confidence in themselves. So we're not proud of who we are, and because we don't have that confidence in who we are not translating that into creativity. So if you don't have the confidence, you cannot create. And in order to have confidence, you need to have pride. You need to say, I love who I am, I love where I come from, I love what I'm about, and what I'm about is good enough. So that's the first thing. But the second, so that's probably a more social, if you will, explanation. But then there will be other reasons why African brands are not doing well. One is a legacy issue. We have not been around in the business of quote unquote branding as long as the others. If you look at some of the African brands, we don't have many brands which are like 100 years old. I mean, Dangote was created like in the 80s. You work with MTN was created in the 90s. Yeah. So many of that is the GSTV also much earlier. But many of the brands that we see, they've been around in a couple of generations. So as a result, we don't have like a legacy of many brands that we say we love this, we grew up with them, and they define us. But I think the way that Coca-Cola has been around since 1886, Nokia since 1800s. So if you go to the big brands, they've been around for a while.
Yeah.
And they've managed to become a part of our daily life and experience. And you know, in the Brand Africa survey we did this year, when we asked them, give us your top 10 African brands, we said African brands. Among the list of African brands, there was Coke and Nike.
Well, you can't blame them because there's Coca-Cola Africa, so.
but you're right. But not only that, but you see Coke within an arm's reach, whereas you don't see an African brand within an arm's reach, which has Coke's end. And also what a brand like Coca-Cola does, when they come to a country, any country in the continent, any country in the world, they try and adapt to the country. They make the bottles smaller, they make it easy for you to transport the bottles, they paint your house Coca-Cola, and are you with me? They create businesses. So then people say, oh, it's our brand. So to me, that's another reason. It's a legacy reason. But the other one, the pride one as well. When I used to go to all these advertising awards around the world, whether it's in London, whether it's in south of France and France, and all those, and I look at some of the work that is being created and that's winning awards. The work that wins awards from France speaks French. The work that wins awards from London speaks English. From America speaks American. In other words, they carry the culture, they carry the style and all those. But the work that comes is trying to be like them. I said, why are you trying to be like the French? The French will beat you at being French. Don't try to be Italian, because they know how to do Italian better than you ever will do Italian.
Yeah, but Thebe, another question, because we can't just say that, you know, we're trying to be a certain way. We were colonized by these people. Not an excuse, because we have our culture, we have our tradition. Why do you think that we're not proud enough to bring those cultures, those languages to the international scene? Why do you think it is?
Well, I mean, but I will tell you what, when I look at the new, is it Glow? I think the Glow ad, when the mother the grandmother who can't see the grandchild because they've given up.
The glow ad, yes.
And I look at that and I said, that's an award-winning global ad. Why? Because it speaks in an African culture. It speaks to it speaks to an African insight in terms of the relationship that grandmothers have got with their, and also it speaks about the merging of the two cultures, the traditional culture and the technology and the new world culture. So work like that we should be taking out to the world. And the more we populate the world with work that looks like us, the more successful our work will become globally. But if we reject us first, then the world will reject us next. But not only that, we've noticed a few things now. They're not only rejecting us, they are now leapfrogging us on being us. Stella McCartney will put up a beautiful Ankara dress and sell it for 100 times more than you can sell it in a market in Kenya, South Africa, or Nigeria. You will look at Louis Vuitton will take a blanket from Lesotho, which sells for less than 100. It sells about $50 in South Africa. But Louis Vuitton took the same blanket, just increased the quality production and sold it for $3,500. And who were the first people in line to buy it? Africans.
Unfortunately.
but an African, if you maybe had taken that and then put in your beautiful brand on it and package it nicely and put it there. I'll tell you, there's a South African example which is quite interesting. A young man called Tepo. His name is Tepo. He created the Tepo jeans. And he sold about $50 as well. And you know what South Africans were saying? South Africans were saying, me, buy a jean named Tepo. Tepo is his name. I know him. Why would I pay $50 for buy jeans of somebody that I've met, that I know, that lives here, that looks like me? So I asked them the question, but do you know a guy called Louis Vuitton? Do you know Dolce & Gabbana yourself? Have you met them?
You know Marc Jacobs, you know?
But you're willing to support them and put more money into their pockets, but you do not know them. So something happened for Tepo. The Duchess of Sussex came to South Africa. And guess what? And she went to Tepo's jeans and bought a pair for Archie and for herself. And then during Global Citizen, Tepo, one of the biggest artists in South Africa, wore Tepo's clothing. Guess what happened?
Everybody went there.
Love it, Tepo. They say, Tepo, you were out of stock. How could you be out of stock? Because you did not supply me before. They're like, but you know we like your jeans. But you didn't like them. You said you can support me. See? So
it means that we were looking for some form of, affirmation from the outside world when we can actually do better.
We want somebody to validate us before we can validate ourselves. So because the Duchess is British or American, validates it now, and she says it's good enough, then we're like, oh, then it is good. But you know, we've always had our goodness in us. So that's that other challenge that we have in terms of how we're doing well. I mean, if you look at the list which we published, 13% of the top 100 brands that Africans admire. Only 13% of the brands that Africans admire are African. 13%. So it means 82% of the brands, the Nikes, the Coca-Colas, the Gucci's. I mean, there were brands like Gucci on the list. You're like, Gucci?
That's not African in any way. Not at all.
One shopping center in Johannesburg and nothing the rest of the continent. And I said, but why Gucci? But I understand, having traveled to all the countries, I see a lot of Gucci's, but I'm sure Gucci has never seen those Gucci's.
I can imagine. So this goes to my next question. How do we change that narrative? Because this conversation is aimed at helping us to build better African brands, helping us to grow those brands in here. Because I don't think that if Italy or the Italians and their brands were not able to grow it before they exported it, people probably would not necessarily buy them. So for us in Africa, how do we change that mindset and change the narrative so that we can appreciate the guy next door who has a small brand but does a great job and his outfits are great? How do we do that?
Well, I think a couple of things. One is it's a difficult thing I'm going to say, but I think we need to do it somehow. Somehow we need our governments to tighten up the borders. to close the borders just a little bit. So, and
Can we take it?
I'll give you an example. So in Rwanda, they used to bring in second-hand goods. So you know the second-hand market, they bring in second-hand clothing.
We call it okrika in Nigeria, okrika.
So you know what Kagame did? Kagame said, no more. You are killing our textile industry. You are killing the ability of our people to create. So sometimes when you are being starved, you become more creative. You know, when you become more creative.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at a country like South Africa, for example, during apartheid, where they couldn't do business with anybody, nobody wanted South Africa. They created many of the brands that we now know because they are now. So somehow you need to close the borders a little bit, but we need international brands because we need the standards, right? We need to see what we are competing with. But also we want to make sure that if they do well here, they do well not because we didn't try. They do well because we gave them a run for their money. So that's what. So the first thing is I think they need to be better for border. But I think the second one is we need to invest in research. If you look at research across the continent, Africa invests 0.5% of the GDP in research. If you go to the rest of the world, they're all the way up to 2.5% of their GDP in research. If you're not researching, you can't come up with the ideas. So our people don't want to research. They want to copy somebody. They're like, maybe he's doing well there. I'm also going to do the same thing. And so nobody is innovating, right? Now, if all of us are doing the same thing, it means somebody is not thinking. We don't do it. The third one is we need to own our intellectual property. So all the complaints we're talking about in terms of the stuff that's happening with the Stella McCartneys, the Louis Vuittons, and all those things, they can do that because we haven't protected our ideas. So we go, but that's our idea. Why are they taking our idea? That Ghana must go back is ours. Now Louis Vuitton is selling it. Are you with me? But you should have protected your ideas. So the third thing is we need to protect our ideas. So if you protect our ideas, now we own them. Now we can commercialize them, right? But third important, I think, more than just tightening up the borders, I think the governments need to incentivize African businesses to do well.
You took my question because I was going to ask that question. Because we cannot just say, as Africans, we want to grow our businesses in isolation of government. Yes, the private sector is big, but then we have governments there to regulate a lot of things. Just like you're saying, we should close the borders. It's the government's duty. So how can Nigerian, South African, Rwandan, African governments help African businesses in growing, especially those big brands?
You know, the problem with African governments, the problem with our governments in the continent, is that they are very quick to give breaks to Coke, to McDonald's, to Microsoft, to all the big brands. They give them tax breaks, they give them incentives, they give them lots of opportunities to be able to flourish here. And they think because those guys are multi-billion, they're going to bring billions of taxes. But if they were investing in the same small businesses, so they need to reverse our mind. They need to say, let's invest in this, let's create the big businesses of the future. Let's make sure that it's not just Azam out of East Africa, Dangote out of Nigeria, Tiger Brands out of South Africa, and a Bidco out of Kenya, which are the big conglomerates which own everything. Let's make sure that there are many other companies like that coming up along the way. So governments need to invest. They need to train. They need to invest in training. They need to invest in helping them understand. So the things we talked about research, help them to perhaps collectively research, do some research, help them to protect ideas, help them to understand the craft. I mean, that's why, one of the things that I'm looking at doing now in the next phase is to, beyond just do the metric of how the brands are doing, is now go on a roadshow across the continent, teaching African entrepreneurs and businesses how to create brands. But there are lots of them, but there's lots of many even if you go to even if you go to Nigeria, you look at a young man like Tunde Ethnic by Tunde Owolabi. You look at the brand, the quality of what he does. If that was done by Missoni out of Italy, it will be flying out of the shelves. Yes.
But
because it's Tunde, who lives in Lagos, we are not supporting you. So the fifth way the government can support us, by the way, is something that we learned in Namibia and in Botswana, which is government saying every single shelf must have a percentage of local made product.
Good.
So now,
that's a good thing.
As you see that, you're like, oh, okay. So now they're being forced to make sure, because otherwise the big brands, the Checkers and all those other brands, retail shops, they're just gonna shop the ones where they buy from the people that have brought them there, right? So now you need to reserve 25%, 30% of your space for locally produced stuff done by entrepreneurs who are making goods under $5 million or under $1 million or under. We need to get that product on the shelf. That's how we're going to make this.
Interesting. I just like to let anybody who's watching, if you have questions, there's a question box below your screen. Just post your question. Thebe and I would see it and would attend to those questions in a bit. But let's talk about the pandemic, Thebe. No country in the world has ever had this experience on this scale, because it happened on a grand scale. And of course, businesses have been hit, which also translates to brands. How do you think that we can come up after this? Because this is not going to last forever. Some countries have, gotten back to business and all of that. But how can African brands who have been trying to survive even before a pandemic as this rise from the dust, permit me to say, like a phoenix, to grow? Because we have to think post-COVID. Yes, we are trying to survive, but what do we do post-COVID? What do we learn now that can help sustain these brands in the future?
Well, I'm hoping that African brands did a couple of things. African businesses and individuals, professionals, I'm hoping they did a couple of things during the pandemic. The first one I'm hoping is we all got a time to reflect. We got time to reflect what matters, what's important, what really adds value, who adds value. Because, a lot of times, I think you also saw that many of these meetings that we have on Zoom and many other places, and you're watching people in meetings, and you go, how come he never says anything? So he's not adding any value. So I've been paying him to come to work every day. So it means, because now you can't shuffle paper the way, you can't shuffle the technology the way we shuffle paper. Now I can see, ask myself, who's adding value? Or what is the value? What does value mean? So I hope we've got a time to reflect. Because coming out of that reflection, you are going to have to recalibrate or redefine it, right? That's the second recalibrate. And many of us have had to recalibrate, right? Many of us have had to say, oh my goodness, so I can't go to the office? How do I use technology? So now we use technology. So we have to recalibrate how we do business, right? And then we just have to rethink. So recovery is really about rethinking. It's about reimagining how you do things, and also calibrating in terms of, do I need all these people? Do I need all these facilities? Do I need all these things that I do? So and says, how do I use them differently? So you can look at some of the things that people have used. Look at Ford, for example. Ford during the pandemic, they started doing ventilator. Gucci started doing, Gucci started doing hand sanitizer. So they say, how do we reuse the time and the resources we have differently? But most importantly, it's about refocusing. You just need to refocus your energies. You need to focus your resources. You need to refocus. When you're coming out of this, in order to recover, you are going to have to rethink how you do things now and what of things. And that's, to me, if there is anything, it's those, because the beauty about the pandemic is that we are all at a reset. Everybody's at the same. It's almost like putting it on your phone, a reset on your computer. You're all starting from scratch. But because we're all starting from scratch, we're all poor, we're all suffering, we're all in trouble. So the ones that are going to recover from the reset are the ones who are going who during the reflection time were able to focus on the right questions, the right issues, were able to recalibrate their mind so they can come back and refocus their energies. So that's what's going to recover. Otherwise, if you're coming out of the pandemic period and you're coming back with the same idea, the same way you used to do things, you are then get ready for your funeral, because the way you used to do things is not going to work anymore. The things you used to do are not going to be important or necessary anymore. The people you used to be with are not going to be as useful anymore. So you have to completely review and
Yeah.
you know.
So I asked this question, I think last week to Claudine, and I'm going to ask that question now. Oh, I don't think it was Claudine, somebody else. So a lot of foreign countries are very interested in Africa right now. It's like a competition of sorts. You know, it's like the new pot of gold. And how do we take advantage of this to our benefit and not necessarily again have another capital flight? How do we capitalize on this post-COVID to grow our economy and better our lot as businesses and brands?
Before COVID, and for many years, coming out of colonial Africa and out of the colonized Africa, when they come here, we used to do this to them. Please help me. So we had our arms reached out. We had messiahs coming to help. And they took advantage of that. They took advantage. They ingrained themselves. That's why their brands and their products are ahead of us. Post this period, when we have to think differently. We have to think, people don't like Trump. Many people don't like Trump for many good reasons. But there's one thing you can like about him, is putting America first.
Exactly.
This means that coming out of COVID, we need to put Africa. We need to put Cape to Cairo, to Ethiopia, to Kenya, or rather Ethiopia to Cabo Verde first. So we need to think. We need to put our countries first. So we need to rewrite the rules, and part of rewriting the rules is to redefining the terms of engagement. You come to my country, you do things my country.
My way. Interesting. One last question, but please, guys, you can ask your questions now. We're almost out of time. Please ask Thebe. He has all the answers. There's a question. There's a question button at the bottom of the screen. Just click on it. Post your question. Thebe is going to answer it wherever you're watching us from. Whether you're in Nigeria, in South Africa, ask the question. But Thebe, there has to be also a synergy of sorts for African countries. Now, one of the reasons why I like to travel, but I don't travel on your scale. I'm a little girl, I'm still learning. But I noticed that it's more expensive to travel to Africa than traveling to anywhere else outside Africa. How can African governments promote trade integrations, taxation, border controls? How do we make sure that there's a synergy of sorts around and across Africa so that Africans don't necessarily fall by the road and then, like you said, the foreigners get to benefit? How do we benefit from our Africa and the trade relations across it? Especially, Ethiopian Airlines has done something that most African countries have not been able to do. They created a hub, a travel hub. Why can't we also have one in West Africa, in the southern parts of Africa, and just have them spread around, the African continent?
That's a good question. We're supposed to be now in the midst of implementing the Africa Free Trade Agreement, where we are opening up the borders. So that's the one part, because that will help us with the flow of goods. But those goods, the point is, those goods are still need to take them across. But it's so expensive for me to move around. So the second thing that we saw, because for example, it's $150 to get a visa when you land in Ghana, probably $300-$400. Probably another $50 in Rwanda. So it's not just the cost of the ticket, but it's the cost of getting into the country, or the cost of staying at a hotel in the country, because our hotels are so expensive when you travel around. So the second thing is not just a free trade, but also the second important thing is that Africa passport we've been talking about. So that Africa passport that has been also implemented 5 years ago or so needs to be realized. All Africans need to be able to move freely, easily.
Well, Thebe, if you've been following the news, the Francophone countries are not necessarily buying that and buying the African money. There's been a split, in the African Union on that matter.
Okay. You're right. No, but you're right. But I'm just talking here for us now. I want to be able to move easy with my passport. I don't want to be taking 30 visas in the continent, because it's 30 visas to move around, and then I don't changing multiple currencies moving around. So that's the other one. So now we need to look at, are we going to introduce the Afro, or are you with me? And I know Nigeria is supposed to, West Africa is supposed to introduce the West African currency February this year. Right? Yes, but what you will know from European countries is, before the European Union, they were like Africa. Because if you look at intra-Africa trade, we had about 15% trading with each other, mostly with the world and not with each other. So, but Europe is at about 70% trading with each other. In other words, the money is staying in Europe, and they're able to get the value in Europe. So the other one is, we need to just open up the skies a bit, right? So so you open up the borders to move goods, which is what Africa Free Trade does. If you give us a passport, we're able to move around. If you give us the currency, I don't have to keep changing money everywhere.
Exactly.
And then open up the skies, so that I don't have to. For example, when I was in Senegal, and I wanted to get to Guinea. It's just next door, by the way. Senegal, Guinea is just across.
Yeah, but you had to fly across.
All the way to Morocco, which is 4 hours up, wait at the airport, come down again the same time to get to a place which is just an hour across. So if you open up the skies a little, but I mean, I'm talking something difficult now, because now nobody's flying anywhere. The airline. But in many ways, if you will, there'll be the 5 things. One of the 5 things that Africa does. You open up the borders. You make it easy to move around. You liberalize the skies. You give us the currency that we can use across board. Life will become a little better. But what it also will do is, it will also help us in many ways to bring down the costs. Because now, if it's easy for me to move around and easy for me to spend the same money, then you have to try and harmonize. You have to harmonize the costs.
Yeah.
Right? Because the final one is perhaps the brands. Because now you can harmonize the brands across the continent, or because now you can say, listen, if you wanna call, you call with MTN, but MTN is connected to Glow, is connected to. Are you with me? If you want to eat X and Y, I mean, let's just harmonize maybe the last difficult one. Let's harmonize the jollof in West Africa.
Don't go there. No, don't go there. The Ghanaians and Nigerians will start fighting now. Let's just leave it.
That's what I'm saying. And the Gambians, they will also come in there and say, "Well, we make the best jollof." But you see, the beauty of the fight is that it gives us the African color with it.
Yes, it does. All right, so let's quickly go to the questions, because we are out of time. MC's Kess here says, I would love to know if there are some practices that brands have adopted during the pandemic that should be retained post-COVID, like working from home. He's saying, can we retain that going forward?
Well, I mean, if you look at brands like Twitter, like Facebook, and many others, they've told their staff, you can work from home forever. So because they've realized one thing, we work harder at home than we did in the office.
Yeah.
Because now you can't say, I'm in a meeting somewhere. They say, where? Who are you meeting? Respect your time, right? They just don't respect your time. We work harder on tech now than we did before. We are more available than we should be. And we multitask more than we. So they've learned. So a mother can raise her children, can cook dinner, can have family time, can also have a meeting, and can do homeschooling. So everybody's going to say, why do I have to go back to work? You've been getting everything you are getting. So that's the one thing that's so if anything else we've learned about COVID is that technology is going to be, technology is here and has redefined our lives, and that's what is going to be maintained going forward. But definitely working from home is a new way.
Is a new way. Okay. It's the Liso here says, I've been so fortunate enough to have traveled our continent and I've seen firsthand just how similar our challenges can be and just how much entrepreneurship. I cannot see the rest of this question.
Me too.
Unfortunately, it's pretty long, so it's difficult for me to read all of it, but it's the Liso. I'm so sorry. Your question is pretty long. We cannot see all of it. TC Malia says, how can heritage restoration help in advancing African trade?
Interesting. So, and I think the first one is, it's so true that when you travel the continent, you get to see what binds us and what distinguishes us. I don't want to say what separates us. I say what binds us.
Because we're unique. Yeah.
Are you with me? So it does. And the one thing, the couple of things that bind us is, you will know that we're a very resilient people. We can weather any storm.
Yes.
We are a very creative people. We can, we can make a plan. We know how to make things happen. That's an African mother who works in the market, can raise 7 children who all go to university and they all become professors and doctors. But somebody else who's got a better job cannot do the same thing. It's just how we are. We're very resourceful as a people. But also we are a very communal people. It is part of who we are to work with each other.
Yeah.
So that's why if you go to Benin, if you go to I forget, Togo. You go to Togo, they still have that market where you come in and you bring in your flour and you use that to buy meat.
Oh, they still have those in Nigeria too. Once in a week, I think. It's like a trade by barter market. So you bring your pepper and get some okra. Yes.
And it is based on the fact that we trust each other. We know how to work with each other. So those 3 traits are part of who we are. If we build on those, we will go a lot further as a people. And I forgot the second question. I'm terrible. What was the second question again?
Well, we couldn't get that question because it was cut short. It was pretty long, so we didn't get it. But I have one more question. For people who are trying to build personal brands, that's a new thing. You are a brand, Thebe. There's nowhere that you would say Thebe Ikalafeng in Africa and that people would not know. You have, and that's because you built your brand. So for people who are trying to build their brands like me, what are the most basic and very important things that we need to have at the back of our mind while we're trying to create or build this brand?
Very important question. First, there must be clarity. So in other words, you must be clear, who are you? So a lot of us, we are not who we are. We are who we think the other people want us to be, or we are who we want to impress. So there must be clarity. So in other words, when people mention your name, what should be the first thing that comes to their mind about you? So there must be clarity about who you are, what you stand for, and what it is that you do. You can't be everything. So and people like to say to me, oh, but Richard Branson does everything. Dangote does everything. No, Dangote doesn't do everything. Dangote does one thing. He's an African industrialist. He's an African entrepreneur. It's the one thing that he has applied across many areas. Just like you would say that TB Joshua is one thing. It's a charismatic, pay-as-you-go church. So I don't know what to call that. So that's the first thing. So clarity, right? The second is authenticity. It has to be authentic. It must be who you are. Because you see, if you cannot be the same person, if you're not true to yourself, then you cannot be true to others. So you have to be true to yourself, right? And third, consistency. You need to be consistent at home, at work, and at play. Because remember, I'm going to see you at one of those places.
Exactly.
So I don't want to now bump into you in church, and I'm like, oh, Mimi is a child of God. And then bump into you in the club, and you've got your shoes on your head, and you do it, and they're like, is that the same person? I'm not saying you should have fun, but I think you should have fun. And you should have fun. But I'm just saying, you know what I mean?
I should be able to recognize all three Thebes at every point. Be the same guy.
There was a Dolly Parton test. Do you remember it?
Dolly yes.
Parton. Who are you on Facebook? Who are you on Twitter? Who are you on Instagram? Who are you on Tinder?
On Tinder.
On one of those, and you could see how some people were different people to different environments. That's the beginning of a problem. How do you sleep with 4 different people at night? It's a problem. Unless you're a prostitute, 4 different people. But you know, but I think your brand should be pure, should be authentic, and you should be consistent. You should be able to. What I love about that Dolly Parton test, by the way, there was one. It was not challenge. There was one anonymous person I do not know. She put up the 4 pictures, and all of them were the same pictures. And she said, "This is who I am." On Instagram, on Twitter, so we should all do that. And by the way, that's to me that's part of the consistency part. The most important thing about building your brand is you must know how you are seen, because there is what you can call your default brand. In other words, who you are when the spotlight is not on you.
Yeah.
That's probably the most raw who you are generally, right? So now you need to understand that. Then you have to ask yourself, am I happy with my default brand? Does it work for me? Does it enable me to reach the goals that are? You ask yourself the question. And then you must the leap. The leap is the design brand. Now you ask yourself, as far as the brand I want to design, what is the space between? Am I this close? Am I this far? And if I'm this far, am I okay with it? Because remember, you have to be okay. But if you, it's fine. They must know me. This is how I am here, and this is how this is what I want to be. I'm fine at how they see me. So look at your brand and look at your design brand, and then you must try and close the gap. The truth is, you need to try and close the gap between who you are as a default and who you are as a designer.
Okay. Thebe, I want to go on and on. You know, it's always a pleasure talking with you. It's like, it's always really refreshing, very informative, but we have to go. We really have to go.
You're an amazing interviewer. I always have fun talking to you, whether here, Lagos, because you're authentic and you're consistent.
Oh, thank you so much. That somebody should put that on my CV, please, so my salary can increase. Thank you, Thebe, so much.
Now I'm going to speak to your boss at the station. I'm going to speak to him. He needs to increase it.
He needs to increase my salary. Thank you so much, Thebe. You're always a delight. This has been a very informative conversation, and I'm going to post it. I'm sure more and more people will benefit from this. Thank you so much. And I hope you're staying safe and at home.
Home, I'm staying safe and I'm staying away from everybody. And today is a holiday. It's June 16th. This is the day when
it's the youth day. Yeah.
Yeah, that's when the young people in South Africa in 1976 went out into the streets to say that enough is enough. We are not going to continue on this course. And by the way, if you look at the continent, 70% of the continent is under the age of 30. So today is a symbolic day to show that youth anyway can make change. Youth anyway can affect. And Africa is youth. And all Africans are young. Even the ones with white beard are very young. So young with the ones we were. So
okay.